The Yuumi Mini rework is set to drop, some massive fizz buffs are on the way, and we've got nerfs to OP picks like Aurelion Sol, Gangplank, and Xayah. Lots to cover in this one, and we're ready to break everything down and give you guys a complete update on the solo queue tier list, thanks to the help of our challenger players and analyzing the most recent data. But before we get into it, be sure to check out Skill-Capped if you want to truly get better at League of Legends. We're the only service that offers a money-back guarantee if you don't climb at least 5 divisions while actively using our service. We do this because our service really does work, and if it doesn't work for you, you shouldn't pay. Learn more at the end of this video or click the link in the description below. Some more massive adjustments to the jungle are going live for 13.5, as Riot will be trying to reduce the power of early ganking. To do this, they're increasing the cooldown of the Sweeper Trinket from 90 scaling to 60 seconds to 120 scaling to 60 seconds. Enemy jungle damage reduction is going to be completely removed to make counter jungling a little faster and more viable now. Jungler lane XP for the first 14 minutes is going from 75% to 40 scaling to 75%. To make farming more rewarding, gold per camp is being increased. The jungle meta is not likely to drastically shift off the back of these changes, but do expect already strong farming junglers like Evelynn and Fiddle to be super dominant in 13.5. We've got a few AP item alterations to break down, the first being Cosmic Drive. Ability power is going up from 65 to 90, while the item will no longer offer 200 health. 200 health has an approximate gold value of 534. 25 ability power has an approximate gold value of 543. All in all, it's a very slight increase in gold efficiency for Cosmic Drive, however, the item will provide way more offensive power. We see this as a net positive change for sure, as there was not a single mage who heavily prioritized Cosmic in previous patches. Vlad is definitely one to watch this patch. Zilean has good potential with Cosmic, and we'll be sure to keep you up to date with any new OP builds that emerge from these changes. Seraph's Embrace is finally being hit with a nerf in 13.5 as its ability power is being reduced from 80 to 70. Health of the item is also being lowered from 250 to 200. Pretty fair nerf overall considering how powerful champs like Aurelion Sol, Cassio, and Anivia have been in recent patches. We're a bit worried for Asol though that Riot may be overshooting here due to the fact they are also directly nerfing him in the same patch. Overall, the mid lane meta should be in a much more balanced state moving forward, as Seraph's users have been very dominant for a while now. Grasp will see a couple of tweaks this patch, with its bonus HP received going from 5 to 7 for melee and 3 to 4 for ranged. Heal health ratio, however, is being reduced, going from 1.7 to 1.2% for melee and 1 to 0.72% for ranged. You'll now have a base heal of 3 for melee and 1.8 for ranged. For the early levels, this should end up a net buff for Grasp, as the base heal being tacked on will outweigh the health ratio nerf. Once you begin stacking some health though, it ends up a nerf, so overall a buff to Grasp's early laning sustain and a nerf to its scaling sustain. One other rune being changed for 13.5 is Triumph. Missing health heal is being reduced from 10 to 5%. To compensate, it will now have a base heal of 2.5% max health. For most cases, this ends up being a nerf because Triumph is generally the most powerful when you are low on HP and receive that heal to barely keep you alive. Moving on to the top lane changes, let's start off with the Aatrox buffs. W cooldown is being reduced from 20 scaling to 15.5 seconds to 20 scaling to 12 seconds. W slow is going from 25% flat to 25 scaling to 35%. At first glance, these may seem like really big buffs, but in reality, they really don't affect Aatrox in the slightest. W is the spell you max out last on Aatrox, and since the ability was not buffed at rank 1, you won't begin to feel the effects of this buff until level 14. There is one more slightly more impactful buff though, as Aatrox RAD is increased from 20 scaling to 40% to 20 scaling to 45%. Key emphasis on the slightly more impactful, as this buff won't really do a whole lot of either. Until you reach level 11, none of these changes even come into effect, so we don't see Aatrox's overall power level increasing enough to warrant a push up the tier list. A tier is where you'll find Aatrox for 13.5. Kennen has been one of the weaker top lane performers for a very long time, so a few buffs are headed his way. Q max becomes drastically stronger as damage is going from 75 scaling to 255 to 75 scaling to 275. Q AP ratio is going up as well from 75 to 85%. E minion damage is up from 50 to 65%. These are the kind of buffs that make players aware that this champion still exists, but they don't actually do a whole lot at pushing Kennen into the meta. We'll continue to place Kennen in the top lane B tier for the time being. There are very few AP carry top laners worth playing right now, but one to watch for 13.5 is going to be Rumble. E magic resistance reduction is going from 10% flat to 12 scaling to 20%. You max E out second on Rumble, so a nice buff here, especially to his mid-game spike. Nothing that will push Rumble over the top, but he'll be a respectable A tier pickup in 13.5. Tryndamere has always been known for his scaling split push power, and it's going to be bolstered even further. Health growth is going from 112 112 to 115. AD growth is up as well from 3.7 to 4. Nothing out of this world, but a couple minor buffs to help Tryndamere compete with the stronger meta top laners like Fiora and Jax. A tier is where Tryndamere will be placed on the tier list. One of the most OP top lane picks throughout all of Season 13 has been Gangplank, and he's finally being targeted with nerfs. Passive base damage is going from 55 scaling to 310 to 50 scaling to 250. E recharge timer is nerfed, going from 18 scaling to 14 seconds to 18 at all ranks. A quality of life nerf is being issued as the number of barrels that Gangplank has available will now be displayed for all players to see. With a change like that, it's hard to accurately predict how impactful it will actually be. We see Gangplank losing a decent chunk of power from these nerfs, but not to the extent where he'll disappear from the meta. For now, Gangplank will be moving from OP into S. There's always at least one change each patch that makes you scratch your head a little, and Yorick being nerfed is that one for 13.5. I guess the reasoning behind the nerf is that Yorick is too dominant for the lower ranks, but when has that not been the case? E bonus ghoul damage is going from 40 to 30%. B tier is where you'll find Yorick for 13.5. Quite a few interesting changes to Pantheon this patch, as his base health regen is being lowered from 7.5 to 6. Base attack speed is up, and attack speed ratio is being increased as well. Q cooldown will be reduced by 2 seconds at rank 1. Q mana cost is down from 30 to 25. Q cast time is buffed, going from 0.25 to 0.2 seconds. E cooldown is being increased from 22 scaling to 16 seconds to 22 scaling to 18 seconds. All in all, this is looking like a really nice win for Pantheon players. Q being buffed at rank 1 while E is only being nerfed at later ranks is definitely net positive. For a champion that makes his mark throughout the early to mid game, more attack speed and frequent Q poke is going to be great. Don't sleep on Pantheon for 13.5 as he will be placed in a strong S tier spot. For the top lane tier list, our OP tier sees a shakeup for 13.5 with Malphite joining Darius and Olaf. Those 13.4 Malphite buffs are proving to be extremely impactful, and they give him 2 viable skill orders now depending on matchup. W max is amazing in melee lanes, and into ranged AQ max works great. With Malphite seeing much more play, it indirectly gives more priority to the Sylas top lane pick. We'll be shifting Sylas up 1 tier this patch, going from B into A tier. Optimal low elo top laners are Yorick, Garen, and Nasus. Fiora, Darius, and Malphite are really good valued bans. The only jungler being directly changed for 13.5 is Rammus. Q is the ability you max first on Rammus, so 20 damage off at level 9 is somewhat significant. Jungle changes this patch are not the best for Rammus either, since he's not a farming jungler at all and wants to be ganking a ton. As a result, we will be shifting Rammus from S into A tier. For the complete jungle tier list, we have Fiddlesticks, Evelynn, and Jarvan standing on top of the meta above everyone else. Other than Evelynn and Fiddle, junglers that either spike hard at level 6 or love to power farm will be enjoying the jungle changes this patch, so Rengar, Master Yi, and Nocturne are a few who will be great options. If there are any outliers who end up spiking super hard due to the jungle alterations, we'll be sure to keep you guys updated for our mid-patch tier list. Best low elo junglers of the patch are Fiddle, Mordekaiser, and Jarvan. Evelynn, Udyr, and Jarvan are 3 of the most optimal jungle bans. We got a pretty significant patch for mid lane in 13.5, with Fizz seeing some nice direct buffs. W mana refund is going from 20 scaling to 52 to 30 scaling to 70. E base damage is going up by 10 at all ranks. E mana cost is also reduced by 15 at all ranks. Each change on their own might not seem that big, but when you put them all together, these are some pretty impactful changes to Fizz. We've had Fizz in our mid lane A tier for a while, but a push into S is what we see fit for 13.5. Are these the buffs LeBlanc needs to finally move back into a viable spot for solo Q? Q will now be dealing 10 scaling to 146 bonus damage to minions. Q will now refund 100% of the mana cost and 30% of the cooldown when it kills a target. Securing farm will become a whole lot easier now with LeBlanc. Farming efficiency is something that a lot of LeBlanc players tend to struggle with, so this buff should lead to a decent chunk of extra gold acquired throughout the game. It's hard to say exactly how impactful this buff will be, so we won't be moving LeBlanc up the tier list for now, but we'll be closely monitoring if her power shifts throughout the patch. A few minor Qiyana buffs are on the way, with her Q damage being increased by 20 at max rank. E cooldown is being buffed too, going from 12 scaling to 8 seconds to 11 scaling to 7 seconds. Qiyana has been hovering around a B and A tier standing for mid lane in recent patches, so she'll be a solid A tier pick moving forward. Riot has a couple nerfs lined up for Aurelion Sol, with his health growth and armor growth both being lowered. Q burst AP ratio is down as well, going from 40 to 35%. The new Aurelion Sol has absolutely flourished as a dominant mid to late game mage, so these nerfs will look to combat that. Nothing too major, but Aurelion Sol will be losing his OP tier status, moving into S for 13.5. More follow-up Azir changes are being issued this patch, so let's break them down. Base stats are being altered in many different ways, with Riot nerfing the early game power of Azir while buffing his late game scaling. Base health and base mana are both down, however armor growth, attack damage scaling, and attack speed scaling are all up. Power from Q is being reduced as the base damage is being lowered by 10 at all ranks. Mana cost is also up from 55 to 65 scaling to 85. The power lost from Q is being put into Azir W with the mana cost lowered from 40 to 30. W damage is going up as well from 50 scaling to 150 to 50 scaling to 200. Passive attack speed from W is being removed though, which will likely force you into building Nashers. Passive changes are looking pretty massive with the duration lowered from 60 to 30 seconds. Cooldown however is down from 180 to 90 seconds, so you'll be able to use the passive way more often. Damage, health, and armor are being altered as well, but the main takeaway from the passive changes is just how much more frequently it will be available. You can be sieging the enemy's base, kill them all, take a few towers, recall for items, and when you get back to sieging again, the passive will be back up so you can pressure right away. It will be interesting to see how these changes shape out for each elo bracket, because Azir's base stats are being hit super hard, so that's going to be more of a nerf to the higher elos. We'll be leaving Azir in the B tier for now and adjust him accordingly for our mid-patch update if the changes prove to be significant. One more mid laner being adjusted for 13.5 is going to be Zed. Base magic resist is lowered from 32 to 29. E cooldown is buffed, going from 5 scaling to 4 seconds to 5 scaling to 3 seconds. So either a buff or a nerf depending on the matchup. Majority of mid lane champions are magic damage, so it wouldn't surprise us to see Zed's overall win rate take a slight hit this patch. We won't be adjusting Zed's tier list placement, and we'll be leaving him in A. Locking down the OP tier spots for mid lane this patch will be Annie, Tristana, and Cassiopeia. Even though Archangel is being nerfed, Cass has been such a strong mid in recent patches that we don't see her overall power dropping off too much. At the very most, she may need an adjustment into S tier, but for now, she'll remain in OP. We moved Malphite top lane into the OP tier this patch, and we're making a similar adjustment for mid lane Mal, just not to the same extent. S tier is where Mal mid will be placed, and he's a really solid option into AD mids like Zed, Yasuo, Irelia, and Yone. Just remember to ban out Sylas. To escape low elo the fastest from mid lane, we would recommend playing Swain, Malzahar, or Annie. Annie, Kassadin, and Aurelion Sol are 3 mid laners we have the highest on the ban list. An ADC who will be making a major pushback in the meta for 13.5 is Jinx. Attack speed growth is going from 1 to 1.36%. W mana cost has been reduced by 10 at all ranks. W slow is being increased by 10% at all ranks. Our monster damage cap is increased from 800 to 1200. With smite damage being increased this season, the R change will be nice to help Jinx match that level of damage. It's not just these buffs though that will push Jinx back into meta, as strong picks like Xayah and Caitlyn are being nerfed. Direct and indirect changes positively affecting Jinx for 13.5, and she'll be moving up into an OP tier spot. Riot overshot slightly with the 13.4 Samira nerf, so they are backpedaling a little on them. Not a full revert, but a partial revert to Samira's passive movement speed per stack, going from 1 scaling to 4% to 2 scaling to 3.5%. After one patch of being a mediocre pick, Samira will be moving back into a solid A tier spot. Caitlyn's laning power is being hit this patch with her base armor lowered from 28 to 27 and base attack damage going from 62 to 60. Kate had been barely holding on to her S tier slot in recent patches, so as a result of these nerfs, we will finally be shifting her down to A. The most OP ADC of recent patches, being Xayah, is targeted with 2 nerfs for 13.5. E base damage per feather is being lowered by 5 at all ranks. E cooldown is being increased from 10 scaling to 8 seconds to 11 scaling to 9 seconds. Will these nerfs be enough to kick Xayah off her pedestal? We expect so, as she won't be the #1 ADC anymore, but will remain in the OP tier for now. AP Twitch builds are most likely dead for 13.4, or at least suboptimal, as his EAP ratio per stack is being reduced from 35 to 30%. This won't affect Twitch's power level for ADC though, as he's better off building AD in most cases anyways. The cheese, Twitch mid, and support that have been popping up as of recent will be hit the hardest by this nerf. So for the ADC tier list, we have Jinx and Xayah leading the way as the most powerful carries. Honestly, Riot has done a pretty decent job of balancing the role in recent patches, as the majority of ADCs are around that A or S tier level. Aside from Vayne and Aphelios, you're not really putting yourself at a huge disadvantage by playing any of the other ADCs. Best low elo bot lane carries include Tristana, Misfortune, and Veigar. Draven, Xayah, and Twitch are who should be banned the most. Just 2 supports being changed this patch, and first up is Ashe. Ashe Q mana cost is being reduced from 50 to 30. Q duration is going from 4 to 6 seconds. Nerfs are to follow through as W base damage is dropping by 10 at all ranks. R cooldown is being hit as well, going from 80 scaling to 60 seconds to 100 scaling to 60 seconds. Rest in peace to Ashe support, as the R and W changes are going to hit the champ extremely hard. From A down to B tier is how we'll be adjusting Ashe on the tier list. The final direct champion change, and by far the most significant one of the patch, is the Yuumi mini rework. Yumi's passive will work quite a bit different now, as it's going to provide you with a heal when a spell or attack hits an enemy. This heal can then be transferred onto her ally if she uses W on them within 4 seconds. The major addition to her passive is that it will now provide you with a friendship score whenever her ally kills champions and minions. Whichever teammate has the highest friendship score will be called the best friend, and gives Yumi's abilities bonus effects when she's attached to them. This will be a way to make it much more powerful for Yumi to attach to her ADC than any other teammate. Q will work very similar to before, but let's talk about the best friend bonus. Hitting an enemy champion with your Q will grant your best friend bonus on hit damage against that target for 5 seconds. W is being altered so that the adaptive force given to Yumi and her ally is removed. The W best friend bonus will give Yumi additional heal and shield power and provide her ally with bonus on hit healing. E is being changed so that it now shields allies instead of healing them. There will be no best friend bonus applied to Yumi's E. Lastly, for the R changes, the massive one is that you'll now be able to steer the waves to follow your mouse. The catch though is that Yumi's R will only slow and no longer root enemies. The waves will heal enemy champions, and excess healing will be converted into a shield. The best friend bonus will grant her ally 20 scaling to 60 armor and magic resist for the duration of the spell. So much to take in here, but I think the biggest alteration, and the one that should make Yumi less frustrating to play against, is that she now gains so much more power when attached to her best friend, which will likely always be her ADC. With the previous version of Yumi, at least in solo queue, it seemed like she would always just hop on her assassin or dive champion and neglect her ADC a lot of the time, so the direction of these changes should be really nice. It's pretty much impossible for us to predict how Yumi will land power-wise, so we'll just keep her in C tier for now, monitor her throughout the patch, and give you guys the most accurate update for our mid-patch tier list. Support tier list for 13.5 will feature Senna, Thresh, Annie, and Rakan as the OP picks. Bit of a shock that Rakan avoids nerfs this patch, so continue to abuse him while you can. Senna and Thresh buffs from last patch have proven to be extremely impactful, so they are 2 of the highest priority supports now. Best low elo supports of the patch are Brand, Heimerdinger, and Zyra. Topping our ban list are Rakan, Thresh, and Annie. Alright guys, before we wrap this up, let's tell you a little more about Skill Capped. So, we offer a 5-division rank up guarantee, and think that's a pretty crazy thing to offer. It's like a gym membership guaranteeing you'll get ripped. Your local gym would go bust if they offered that, right? Not us. We've offered this for years because our service really does work. It works so well, in fact, that we're able to produce by far the largest catalog of premium league guides on the internet. We add over 20 videos a week, with over 1,600 guides curated into over 100 courses no one can compare. We've also sent Challenger players into Elo Hell 714 times and counting, where they commentate how to carry live. They also respond to all questions asked. Sign up today for as little as $6.99 a month if you are serious about improving. So there you have it guys, a complete look on the solo queue meta heading into 13.5. Thank you all so much for watching, good luck in solo queue, and we'll see you in the next one.